What's up, YouTube? So it's been over a year since I've created a video in an attempt to try to describe updates on my car and what I've been doing with it and just the general performance. So I'm going to try to cover here quickly what's going on with the vehicle. I had the opportunity last month in June the 22nd to go to Millville, New Jersey to the Jersey Sate Motorsports Park in our lightning course and try out another session, pace that is intermediate, and see how this car performs. You'll see a video that's coming out today or the next day regarding that track experience, but I just want to cover here some of the updates I've done in the last year and really how things performed and maybe where I can head from here to make the car perform even better. So this is the course I took the car to. It's lightning course. It consists of 10 turns in about 1 mile and 9/10, just under 2 miles. So you can see there's a turn 7 there. It's one of the most challenging turns at only 90 degrees almost. So there are, there's a nice straightaway and there are some, pretty difficult turns, but it's a track to definitely learn and, get faster in all the sessions that you can participate in. Especially for $195, it was a pretty good experience for 1 hour and 20 minutes out there in the track. So anyway, we'll get right into it. I mean, how did the car really perform? I think basically the biggest problem I had was oversteer, the loose in the rear end, and I think that's one thing I covered, I guess, a year ago was the camber I have set in the rear just shy of a -degree. And with that out of spec is a -1.5 plus or minus a ½ degree in the rear of the car, and which is twice the recommended of the camber in the front. And because of the clearance issues with the HSD coilovers, I really couldn't go with much more negative camber, or I would be rubbing the strut in the rear. So this is where I'm at now. This is an offset of 38 in the rear. I could go, I think the recommended for the 20-inch wheel is a 25 offset, which would bring the wheel out basically another 13, roughly 13 millimeters, and give me an extra room for camber. So one of the ways to correct oversteer, the back end going out, in other words, in turns under throttle, is lower ride height in the rear, from the research I've done, as well as increased negative camber in the rear, which I'm already out of spec. I should have more. And I think I can get a wheel spacer and adjust the camber in the rear, which I think is my next step. I would like to maybe look into different coilovers just for the rear, so I can run a lower ride height in the rear. And we'll get to that, I guess, right now. How was I able to even come to that conclusion? Well, in the last year, I have performed a resonator delete on the CNT version 3 exhaust. If you look underneath the car here now, I had a similar angle a year ago, but you can see there's really no clearance issues now. That resonator, the tub that existed basically in the the front section of the catback exhaust in the CNT is now gone. Underneath the car, you can see here's the CNT version 3 catback exhaust. In this front section of the exhaust, the resonator was deleted and replaced with 2 stainless pipes welded together in an H-pipe configuration, both at the rear and at the front in this section of the exhaust. Thanks to Ryan's Random Rides on YouTube, he actually gave me the confidence to go and do that delete of the resonator. I really think the exhaust sounds a lot deeper. It's definitely louder. There's some more popping, like more of a hollow sound on downshifts because you don't have that resonator to basically muffle. But I think I definitely like the throttle application sound a lot better. Tire pressures were a big thing at the track, and I adjusted the rear tires down significantly. You can see basically I have 24 pounds of pressure in there now cold. So it's around 27 psi hot. And you can see that the tread wear, the indicator for the tread wear, you can almost see the old line is up here. This is where if I'm running 32 to 33 in the rears, that's about where the wear mark is. But now recently, just since the event, I've been running more down in the 24 or so cold psi range, and that is definitely getting a better contact patch in the rear. I think the other big thing, and I learned this, it came to my realization over a year and a half ago at the first event, is that the only purpose of tread in a tire, you can see the tire here, the only purpose of that tread is to divert water from the tread and improve grip in wet driving conditions. Other than that, tread is useless. And the more rubber you have on the road, the better grip handling you're going to have. So really what these big grooves here do in the Nitto Invo tire, in theory, is make this 285 tire, I would estimate, say, around a 265 tire. It's lost that much rubber in cross-section that it's really not, I think, gripping as well as it could be in the rear of the car. So I might want to get some different drag radials, more slicks, you could say, basically in the rear of the car. So that's more or less why NASCAR runs slicks basically in their setups, because they don't need tread if they're not ever driving in even drizzle. So I think that would definitely improve the rear grip as well. You can see where the indicator is, and you can see I tore these tires up a little bit. I have negative 1.2 degrees camber in the front, but the wear is really right spot on where it should be at 40 psi. So that's a warm psi, but so it might be around 37 or so cold. But it was performing quite well. The tires, no understeer. It was lock solid in the front to the track. Given I only have two 45 tires, I was very impressed with the handling. I don't want to ramble on here, but how the brakes performed, and I had put in the Castrol SRF fluid, and that did very well, I think, on a hot day where it was near 90 degrees or in the upper 80s and not much wind. But I did sense, a little bit of a glazing maybe on the rotors. I don't know, I don't see it much here, but it was definitely like a bluish hue, like a burning effect. It's basically cleaned off the rotors since the event in about less than a week, just under normal street driving. But I think the pedal did feel softer as the car got hotter, the air temperature got hotter, the track everything got hotter. I think one thing that contributed to it possibly was the OEM brake lines, and I know it wasn't the fluid, because this fluid, there was no way it was boiling, because I wasn't running the car that hard, but the lines were getting extremely hot, and I think that rubber became more malleable and possibly contributed to a softer pedal feel just by that force of the pedal just using, being applied to expanding the lines and not really pushing the pads against the rotors. So that's something I want to look into, is maybe getting stainless lines, but I know there is a lot of dispute out there, argument whether that's really does any good. It's just for the protection of the lines and doesn't really help the pedal feel at all. But I have read several accounts and it does, so I would like to give it at least a try. But you can see all the brake dust on the wheels, obviously, from the event. There's caked on there, but the brakes performed very well, other than that little bit of pedal feel and lack of grip, I guess I could say, that it looked like as they were glazing over. So was like I was melting the pad. I mean, I don't know if that's, but you don't see it on there anymore. So, but generally, you know, it's back to a superior brake feel again in the cooler temperature. So I think it was just when it got really hot, I was putting the brakes to it, the pads as well as the rubber lines to a test. When braking, I did notice a difference and the importance of basically stabbing or the brake pedal versus easing into the brake. And this is something I actually just didn't remember in a year and a half. I tried to remind myself, but it is important when you're out there. You know, the less time you spend on the brake, I mean, obviously the less hot the rotor and everything's going to get, and the more effective it is just to stab the brake at when you need it, let off, and then downshift, and you know, you can basically increase your efficiency and everything by that rather than riding the brakes, you know, for even just 2-3 seconds versus hitting it for 1 second. And that's, you know, I think that's something I learned to do better. So it could be that I just wasn't using the brakes correctly, and you know, that's why maybe they glazed over so a little bit. So it was more like you have to be more aggressive with the brakes, and I think that will also, you know, comes with experience. There are a lot of reviews online about that transmission mount. I think that definitely improved. It improves a couple things. One is full throttle, or even over half, 3/4 throttle. First to second is a lot easier. There's not as much play or movement in the shifter. Second to third, under throttle is definitely improved. Cornering, shifting while cornering, like say, out of an intersection, that is a definitely improved. And just rev matching in general, third to fourth, there's just a better feel to the shifters. Alright, so looking underneath the hood of the car, you can see one of the first things I did was the coolant bypass for the throttle body, and basically this just diverts the coolant flow around the throttle body instead of through the throttle body, and basically just keeps the IATs cooler, and basically I think it definitely doesn't hurt. So I think if you're driving in above, you know, freezing temperatures, there's no need to have 200 and some degree coolant running through the intake, so, or throttle body. The catch can was the next thing. I ordered this through Sakumichi company. He's a very good person to work with. He was very knowledgeable of the Genesis Coupe and the application of his craftsmanship to this vehicle. You can see I have a sight glass on the catch can, and I have a drain that goes behind the front anti-sway bar. So I can drain the catch can when I do oil changes. And I'll show you a picture here of what the basically what came out of the catch can in my first oil change, and this was about 3,000 miles or shy, over like 4 or 5 months. It was just a normal oil change, so over the winter months basically. It was very good craftsmanship on his part, and it basically just prevents any of that positive crankcase ventilation system vapors and fluids from entering the intake. So especially when you run the car hard and go to these track events, I think it's really important to have this catch can. And you keep an eye out for that next video I'm going to have coming out. It's just going to be a summary of a few laps at that road course, and I think you definitely will get an idea of how this car handles. I mean, I know I have to work a little bit with my rev matching. I think it wasn't until 14 they introduced rev matching into the automatic, and that's, you know, honestly, they're always faster. I mean, there's very few people that can shift a manual vehicle faster than these newer automatic transmissions are shifting. I definitely like the general engagement with the vehicle, and feel connected to the vehicle when you're driving a manual. But when you're trying to obviously enter a corner at 100 miles an hour, brake, downshift 2 times from 5th to 3rd, and match the revs and do it as quickly, as automated electronics can do it, it's a challenge. And I'm up to, it was fun to do that, and I think you'll just see a general perspective on what an intermediate class event is like at that course.